You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show. 14 years, 1,400 episodes, going on 1,500 because I don't have anything to do with my bloody time. Make sure you refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to iTunes there and give us a 5-star review. Somebody wrote a really ugly 1-star review last week because they don't like that we had a guest on that was into a certain ex-president. And I guess we talked about that, and they didn't like it. They gave you a 1-star review. But as you know, we've had people from both sides of the aisle on here, so we're not really that slanted of a show. But geez, we got a 1-star review from this guy, and he was like, "This is a leftist show," and I'm like, I think one of the guys who's running for president right now from the GOP. We had on the show shortly ago. Anyway, guys, be sure to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives, and help me fix that 1-star rating, and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. I beg of you, please. Go to iTunes, or go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, and all the other places we are on the internet. We're going to be talking about leadership today, one of my favorite subjects, so much of my favorite subjects. I wrote a book on it. And we've got two brilliant gentlemen who are going to be talking about leadership. And, I don't know, they may overthrow the whole premise of my book and whatever I've been doing since 18. They are the authors of the newest book that comes out August 29th, 2023. Leadership is Overrated. What? I wrote a book about it. I guess I shouldn't have. Leadership is Overrated. How the Navy SEALs and successful businesses create self-leading teams that win. Kyle Buckett and Chris Mefford is on the show with us today. They're here to talk about their latest book and all that good stuff. Welcome to the show, Kyle and Chris. How are you?
Oh, we're doing great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming. We certainly appreciate it. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you guys on the interwebs?
Well, we're cooler than .coms these days because we want you to go to cultureforce.team. Or if you're old school and you want to go to .com, you can go to leadershipisoverrated.com and find us there.
There you go. So give us a bio from each of you guys. Give us a little bit of background and origin story on both of you. I'll
go first, Chris, because whenever I go after Kyle, I feel really insignificant and it diminishes me quite a bit. So
his words, not mine.
He upstage you?
But I'm in business. I've been in marketing and leadership for 20 years. I worked at numerous organizations that have been voted best place to work. And I love it. These days I do a lot of coaching and leadership mastermind groups and just helping organizations figure out, how to step away from terrible leadership and find ways to generate revenue through good leadership and good culture and good organizations. And so many people want to talk about, all the fun stuff that their business does, but they don't focus on how revenue is generated through great cultures and great leadership. And so they get lost. But I've done that for many years and been in marketing for just as long and met Kyle. And here we are today.
There you go. Kyle, give us the lowdown.
Yeah, so I had a wonderful career in the military. I retired after 20 years. And I was a Navy SEAL tactical leader. I got to do a lot of cool stuff, everything from single man loan operations all the way up to my largest operation, which was 800 Marines, 24 tanks, 23 helicopters, 7 jets, and an entire team of the Army Civil Corps and engineers as we were clearing a province in southern Kaligaz, Helmand province.
Holy
and
wow.
So, and a lot of things in between, right? Over the years. And as well as I've started several small businesses, helped my wife run her small business. And what we found over the years and what I've gotten really passionate about goes back to back in 2000, which we'll get into, but just highlight real quick, Chris, is in 2011, I was tasked with taking a SEAL team into Afghanistan and going over there and trying to make an impact and change the culture in the region by working by, through, and with the local population to try and establish democracy in the region, right? But the guys that I was working with had just come back from a very arduous, very tactical, an action-packed deployment. And in their last 2 weeks of their deployment, their hero, their Captain America, was shot down. His helicopter was shot down, and he was killed.
Oh, no.
And so in comes, Kyle Buckett and goes, hey, the people that just killed your best friend, that just killed your hero, that was going to be your commander, that I was going to be attached to, those people, we're going to go back in Afghanistan and we're going to work by, through, and with them to establish democracy in the region. We're going to be living with them. So I had to do kind of a double, culture shift, in the sense that we had to try and figure out, hey, how are we going to change this culture within the unit to then go and change, an Afghani culture. And so I got very interested in it and started realizing, I wish I would have had our book. Hey, selfish book. But how do we refine and create positive cultures that attract great people, right? Mm-hmm. Chris said it, we believe great people make elite teams make organizations elite. And when you have elite organizations striving for excellence and mission, the world's a much better place. So we started nerding out on this concept of how we could do that. And that's kind of what got us here today.
There you go, man. That sounds like quite the party. You having all that armory out there doing stuff.
I told you he should go first or second.
Yeah.
How do you follow that? Hey, Kyle, today I impacted the culture of 22 people on the marketing team. Oh, that's great, Chris. I brought democracy to Afghanistan. Yeah.
There you go. We've had a number of military people on, and me studying the military, the U.S. military specifically. It is amazing how we build, or I really shouldn't say we, because I'm not in the military, but America builds their military structure and their leadership structure. And you see the fallacies of leadership structure in the Ukraine war, how they have a different tiered system of generals or whatever the hell is they do, drunken guys on vodka, evidently. Because turns out they've gone from, the second most powerful army in the world to the second most powerful army in Ukraine, as Secretary Blinken, I think, said. So you guys call this thing Leadership Is Overrated. Show me on the doll where leadership hurt you, and why'd you call it that?
Well, I'll take this on first. The world doesn't need another book on culture and on leadership, Chris. I mean, you know that. You've got a whole show and made a whole career of this. So that's not what you need to do. But as Kyle and I looked around and we looked at places that, weren't awesome or they weren't great. And I was like, I wasn't drawn to Kyle necessarily because he was this cool, badass guy that was a Navy SEAL that did all this incredible stuff. I was drawn, hey, what do the SEALs do to keep all of the bad stuff out, all of the bad people out of the organization, and yet still remain world class that everyone looks up to and they get there. And, there's such a rigorous, training they go through and all that, but that surely can't be the only thing that happens. And, and I said, it's fascinating, what good organizations do and how they manage and keep the bad things out and how they continue to, attract top talent time and time again, and why is it survey after survey, year after year, when people asked, do you like your boss? 85% say I don't. And yet we spend $166 billion a year in this country, $300 billion globally on leadership development. And so if that's the case, shouldn't everybody love their boss? Shouldn't every organization be thriving? Shouldn't everybody? And so we started to say, maybe this whole leadership structure that we've built, this whole pyramid of books and TED Talks and everything in between, from workshops to conferences, maybe that's what's broken. And how we go about building leaders and creating leaders in this country is just to sell more conferences and books, and it's not necessarily to make the team great. And what the SEALs focus on is the team, not the leader. And and the organizations I worked with and that I've seen that have been great, it's been really a focus on the team and not the individual. And so we just said, hey, you know what if leadership is just overrated? And we've made it that way. And so, that's where we arrived at sort of a point on how we put this book together.
There you go. Any thoughts you want to kick in there, Kyle, on that?
Yeah, no, well said, Chris. Additionally, the one thing that has always been fascinating to me, because I was so fortunate in the sense that I got to be raised by, incredible individuals, tacticians, and leaders within the SEAL teams. And, I became a student of trying to focus on like, how do we continue to thrive? How do we continue to succeed? How does the SEAL teams continue to innovate and bring in new technologies as guys are retiring, right? As guys are getting out. And it focused me and honed me into one thing very specifically that we talk about in the book, which is, we focus on replacing ourselves. And it's a big piece of our culture. A big piece of our culture is, focusing on replacing yourself, growing the next guy or gal to come in and take over for you in certain areas. So that's another thing I just wanted to add to what
Kyle, why don't you go ahead? This is a great spot and tell him what we actually wanted to call the book.
I wanted to call the book. This is funny, Chris Voss. I wanted to call the book "Kill the Leader."
Wow.
And so this is funny. We're going back and forth with HarperCollins on this title, literally on January 5th.
Oh,
and we're going back and forth. And then January 6th happens and Chris and I get a call like on January 7th. Yeah, we got to change that name.
No, absolutely not. So we made chapter 1, Kill the Leader. But the premise is, and Kyle will share this, the SEALs have this thing where as they practice getting ready for missions, they'll go up and say, hey, 3 minutes into the mission, 3 hours into the mission, you're dead and you're the leader. And then they look to the rest of the team and say, let
me clean that up a little bit.
Kyle, so what I tell better SEAL stories than you. We both know that. Please save me.
We in training exercises, as a trainer, for myself being a trainer as well, what we would do in the exercises, we would walk over to the commander on the mission, the officer in charge on the mission, and say, all right, you just took a gunshot wound, to the heart or, to the head, or bottom line, you're out, play dead. And what it does is it forces the next in command, the next in charge, to step up. And it does 3 things, really. It enables that individual to see, what their merit is when they step into the role. It allows the team to see and understand, but then it also allows the actual leader who's now playing dead, hey, how good of a job have I been doing raising the next guy up? So it's a pretty great exercise that we do from time to time.
There you go. Now, you said that 79% of people, don't like their bosses. You talk in the book about how a lot of people leave their jobs usually due to poor leadership. They don't like their boss or whoever's there, which is kind of a low number, actually, when you think about it. When they pulled my employees, 60% of them said they hated me 110% of the time, every time. That's a joke.
Yeah, right. Right.
What is that from? That's from a movie.
That's from Anchorman.
That's from Anchorman. There you go.
Thank you. Wait, Anchorman's a San Diego guy, just like us.
There you go. 100% of the time. The thing about the military, and I believe there is a term for it, but one of the great things about the U.S. military is they do what you guys talk about. Everyone is trained to where if there's a missing link in the chain of command or someone is taken out of position, that they can make decisions on the ground and they're not just lost in what to do in an operational theater or some sort of scenario where they're like they just won't fall apart and be like, well, we just lost our boss, so what do we fucking do? And I think that's really brilliant. Is there a name for that? I think I don't know.
Replacing yourself, focusing on replacing yourself. But in terms of like a specific nomenclature, nothing comes to mind. I'm sure that I'll get some comments later on from some of my friends, like, "Hey, dummy, this is what it's called."
And I think I've heard what it's called, so I'm in the dummy list now.
Well, I'll just go in. I was just reading the book Citizen Soldier. It was about World War II, and it was like, hey, how do you take a group of teachers and farmers and turn them into a world class fighting group that takes on the mighty German juggernaut that's already out there. And the premise was, I think we typically think of the leadership as this top down staunch, you obey every single order all the time, no matter what. And that's not really what America's military does. It teaches people how to solve problems on their own. So where the Germans were unable to make those decisions because it was a true top-down organization. Mm-hmm. And so they were afraid to make a decision because they hadn't been told what to do, versus the citizens we brought in. We told them there was a command for the sense of structure, but the reality was, hey, we're all solving problems together. How do we do this? How do we overcome it? How do we win? And that's, right. I think the true nature of what brings success is when you focus on the team itself. And you don't say, hey, I'm the leader. I have all the answers. I know exactly what we're going to do and when we're going to do it and how we're going to do it and who we're going to do it with. Yeah, that's where leaders get into trouble. And that's where they fail. And that's what happened. Then the team starts to hate them because they don't know what to do. They're embarrassed and they're too insecure. When you start focusing on the team and you say, hey, we're in this together and I don't have all the answers and I need your help and we're going to figure this all out. And here's my role. My role is to go present and bring everybody else in, get us the resources we need. But you and the team, your role is to help me and all of us solve this problem. It starts to change an organization. It starts to change the entire focus. And really what it comes down to, here's what's at stake, Chris, as Kyle was alluding to earlier, is when people are disengaged and they're not fully focused, 85% aren't fully engaged because they don't like their boss. They don't think they respect them. They're not appreciated by them. What that really means is they're not working at their peak. And so if people aren't working at their peak every day, they come in and put 50% in, 60% in, 30% based on this data. The reality is your company's not going to thrive. And so when I talk about, hey, a lot of people want to talk about fixing their culture and they'll put a ping pong table in sort of a lunch room and say, hey, we play ping pong.
Or pizza lunch.
Right. The reality is there's a financial cost, there's a people cost, and there's an opportunity loss around all of this. And so the financial cost is often overlooked. And so in this book, Leadership Is Overrated, where you can find it at leadershipisoverrated.com, we really focus every single chapter on, hey, here's the revenue that's at stake when it pertains to empathy. Here's the revenues at stake what's at stake with empowerment. Here's the opportunity that's lost because your team isn't working at their peak. And then what I call opportunity lost, rather, is that people don't want to go into leadership because they see that leaders aren't respected. They see that leaders aren't motivating and they're actually demotivating. And so they avoid it. So good leaders avoid it. And so there's that opportunity that doesn't happen. And so all of that comes into play. And that's why, again, we think this whole thing is a broken industry. It's a class structure gone bad. And we need to reset everything and start from scratch and say, okay, what do we do that really works? And we believe it's when you focus on the team.
There you go. And so in the title of your book, it's there, Create Self-Leading Teams That Win. And I guess, do you have the same surmise that I do, that sometimes you're in organizations and everyone just thinks the CEO is the leader? We're just like, I don't know, we follow whatever guy on the mountain says. And, really when it comes down to it, everyone's a leader. Everyone can be a leader. You can be the guy on the street and something happens on the bus and you can be the guy who goes, hey man, we're going to take charge of this group and whatever is happening is we're going to take control. But parents a leader. Right. I'm really surprised about how many parents don't think they're leaders. And maybe they're not because maybe they're bratty little kids run the show. I've seen that. What was that one show, the nanny show? So your guys' thing is, building out teams inside of your organization and having people lead them from there. Is that correct?
Correct. And we believe in, leadership at every level. And I know it sounds very elementary and everyone's like, duh. But then we point back and go, well, hold on. Don't say duh. And then look at all the stats that Chris just rattled off, 80% across America. And so what we really focus on is, like we say in the SEAL teams, is you can have leadership at every single level, right? We focus on, hey, when you get back from an operation, for example, right? You have to take care of the team's gear. So that could be, the vehicles or the maritime platform, the boats, whatever it might be, right? We have to take care of the team gear. And then when we're done with that, we would take care of our platoon gear, right? And when we're done with that, when we're done with platoon gear, something that might be like Zodiacs that the platoon owns or something like that. Then when we're done with that, we take care of departmental gear. So maybe it's sniper gear, explosive breacher gear, you name comms gear, whatever, communication gear, whatever. Then when you're done with all of that, then you can take care of your personal gear, right? So but the point of, and now on the reverse side, you have leadership at every single level, right? Like you have to make sure that your gear's done right, and then the next one, and then it goes in the reverse, right? And so we really preach, in the SEAL teams, that you can have leadership at every single level. That someone can walk over and go, "Hey, boss. Hey, Buck." My nickname when I was, a TAC lead. "Hey, Buck, your gear's incorrect. Let me help you fix that." For example, right? And, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So teamwork, leadership, and then you guys talk about how to apply to that. Does a lot of the techniques you have in the book come from the Navy SEALs and your guys' experience then?
I would say, I don't know if we put necessarily, it's a good question. I don't know if we put necessarily a ratio on it. Probably bad on me, Chris, Mefford, that I don't know, but I would probably say it's probably 50-50.
Yeah, I think, Chris, what we wanted to do that was unique was we wanted to, again, there are plenty of Navy SEAL books out there on, about great leadership. But what we wanted to really do is translate it into real world experience, take the experiences that I've had with great organizations. I worked at the Dave Ramsey organization, voted best place to work at least 10, 11 times. I work at CCW Global now. I've been working with them, voted best place to work in our city for 8 straight years. And so what is it that these companies do that is different, and how can we connect the dots on what great military groups like the Navy SEALs do, and how can we pass that along? Here's the reality. When you talk to leaders, they don't think they're the problem. 70% of leaders think that it's somebody else and that their team loves them, and then that's it. And we know that works out because only 30% typically of people actually like their boss. And so there's this crossover where it's almost the same amount of people who hate their boss actually thinks they like him, or the boss thinks they're not the problem at all. And that's an issue. And then the second thing I want to tap into, Kyle said, is that, I think most people think I have to rely on the leader. This book is for a leader. But the reality is you have to start where you're at. You could be part of the problem because you have 3 people in your grouping or your coworkers that you see treated poorly. And so you don't have a good example. So you think that's what leadership is. And so you just kind of do it. So you need to start with the branch you're on. Like, if this is the chair you're in, make the 3 people around you great. Acknowledge them. Tell them you appreciate them. Work together. Say, how do we work on this project together? But there's too much politics that goes on internally. There's too many leaders that are too unwilling to give up control. And so we just continue to create this vortex of terribleness year after year, no matter how much money we throw at the problem.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here with a little station break. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. We'll resume here in a second. I'd like to invite you to come to my coaching, speaking, and training courses website. You can also see our new podcast over there at chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Over there, you can find all the different stuff that we do for speaking engagements if you'd like to hire me, training courses that we offer, and coaching for leadership, management, entrepreneurism, podcasting, corporate stuff. With over 35 years of experience in business and running companies as CEO. And be sure to check out chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Now back to the show.
It seems like a lot of people just give lip service to it. It's kind of like the people that buy books, and I'm guilty of this, buying books and then never reading them and thinking that somehow by owning the book you get osmosis. It's the people that always go to motivational seminars but can never get motivated. It's like you've been to Tony Robbins like 10 fucking times and you're still depressed. Like maybe it's not Tony Robbins you need in your life. Maybe, I don't know, whatever.
It's funny, I feel like things like that, it's like motivation without instruction is sometimes useless. You got me excited, I'm ready, but what's next?
We're really ready.
Nobody that buys our book will not read it. We know that everyone who purchases our book will actually absolutely read it. It's too hard to put down for sure.
There you go. And I think
all right, I'm not serious if you can't see me. But it is what it is.
We can see you. We see you and we hear you, Chris. There you go. So any of your thoughts, Kyle, on that?
It's an interesting. I'd like to actually throw it back to you, Mr. Voss. You've had a lot of great guests on the show. Mm-hmm. I guess that kind of goes towards the author dilemma, if you will, right? You understand and know what you're putting into a book or a project per se, and then you are faced with that dilemma where you want it to be in a digestible manner, and you want it to be entertaining, where people keep turning the pages, as Chris just said. So, along that vein, I'd put it even to you, what was the challenges you kind of faced when you were kind of framing yours out and ensuring that it was,
when I was sitting there going, no one's going to read this shit. I don't know.
We had the same conversations.
My luck with my book, Beacon's Leadership, was, I've been telling these stories for a million years, and I'd hoed them and told them, and some were interesting, and I don't know, more were interesting to me probably than others. I don't fucking know. But trying to just the stories were already there. The second book is the one I'm having fun with, because I can't rely on any of my stories that I've been carrying around for 30 years, telling people at parties that were like, really, this guy? But no, it's hard to frame him and make him interesting. Leadership, sometimes business is hard to talk about, but, putting into frames of stories, and I'm sure you probably have a lot of stories from your Navy SEALs day to make it appeal today. And that's what people love. They love the stories. They love, seeing how that works. And that's really what we do. I mean, that's what the show does. We tell stories, and I make up all this shit anyway. I mean,
we got serious about that when Kyle and I started talking about this. I'm like, we can't do another business book that's just full of stats and data. And while we have that, we've got really good stories about Aretha Franklin and how she created her stuff. We've got stories about Icelandic soccer. We've got stories about monks and Mother Teresa. We've got stories about 19th century explorers. We've got obviously Navy SEAL stories and business stories as well woven in. But we tried to make it like full of information, but also really make it fun to read, like some interesting things that, people weren't aware of, and people they know, and situations they're aware of that they probably had no idea that that's the way that they were operating.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, earlier Kyle said, leadership is overrated, focus on the team, don't focus so much on yourself. And it's like, duh, that's what, everyone says. So why does nobody do it? But the reality is, I worked for Dave Ramsey, who's in the Radio Hall of Fame. We were a $100 million company telling people to get on a budget. I mean, the easy stuff, Jenny Craig
literally
$1 billion business out of telling people to eat fewer calories than they burn. Sometimes it's the easy stuff that's the hardest to pull together for ourselves. And I feel like leadership is that, when I've talked to people about the book and said, hey, from leadership groups, and said, here's the title, they want to fight back. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's ridiculous. That's not true. And I mean, it's part of because they're so indoctrinated into the system that we need to focus on the leader, that they just can't possibly break free from that kind of thinking. And they're part of the problem, obviously.
And, but I like what you guys did with the book, with the Leadership Is Overrated, because it's catches and you go, wait, what? And, I've read a lot of leadership books. I've been a leader, a CEO since I was 18 when I started my first company, and lots of companies. And so I'm really over it. I'm tired. I want to go home. But the thing is I still read leadership books to this day, and being able to look at things from so many different angles. And, it's like one of those, what's the old thing they say about the teacher? The teacher learns more than the student. And so being able to look at something from a different angle or a paradigm, or, how did the SEALs look at this? We've had people on from the Air Force. We have people from the Army. I hope that's okay with you guys.
We have the military, yes.
Shout out to both services. Both have saved my life. So I'm forever grateful.
There you go. My brother was a Marine. So, he sometimes has, he has that whole like, those other guys. And you're just like, I think he has issues with the Coast Guard, and who doesn't, right? Sorry, I just lost the two guys in the Coast Guard on these. But being able to take things from a different angle, you get these epiphanies. And even now, I'll be listening to a book on leadership, and I'll, okay, this is a different way to look at that, or I never looked at it that way. And so I think it's a good thing to do, because I'm a real out of the box thinker. I mean, I'm always trying to get outside the box and trying to look at things from different angles, because that's how you can problem solve, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll be very interested to learn, and I'll give your listeners an inside scoop from my perspective. When I initially set out to do this with Chris, I was really focused on developing culture, like how you can actually refine, mold it, and custom create a very custom culture that you're actually desiring. And so I will be very interested to see how many of our readers pick that up and garner that aspect of the book from how we framed it out. Because for me, that was very unique in what we did. I mean, it's broken into really 3 sections on how you define it, and then how you build it, and then how do you sustain it. Not just around creating self-leading teams that win. It's also, hey, how do you actually custom create and define a culture that you're looking for, whether it be, high energy or a very chill, relaxed environment, and on and on and on. So I'm really curious to find out. I think the Chris Voss listeners are going to be the ones that really pick up on that piece.
You can say that. Kyle, why don't you share? Kyle taught me this, Chris. Whether you want to focus on your culture or not, you'll get a culture at your organization.
That's a great point.
But it's coming, and it could potentially be one you hate. I can't tell you how many leaders, and it's surprising the fact that I can even make that statement. I can't tell you how many leaders have told me, I'm not happy with my team, or I don't know what to do. And I'm like, you're the problem and the solution. Like, you can't ignore it and expect it to this amazing, great culture to happen. Jim Collins said it best, you have to choose to be great every day, just like you have to choose to create the environment and the organization you want. And so many people and leaders feel hamstrung. And I'm like, aren't you in charge? Don't you make the shot? Call the shots? Like, didn't you start this thing? Like, how did you let it get so far out of hand? And, Kyle talks a lot about that, and how you have to choose and really the SEALs choose to do that. Be great. We're not going to ignore our culture. We're going to focus on this is who we are. This is how we talk. This is what we do. This is how we do it. To the point, Kyle, I keep feeling like I'm stealing your stories, so jump in here, please admit, which is, hey, the SEALs don't practice until they do it right. Kyle shared, we practice till it's impossible for us to get it wrong. Yeah. That's a culture thing that comes through.
Yeah. There you go. I actually want to jump back because we just went right past it. And I'm fascinated to ask Mr. Voss, what was the company when you were 18?
My first company I fell into, I grown up with helping my father with this stucco foundation, plastering, cement, stucco business. And, it was the thing to get my mom to get us out of the house for the summer. Sure. And so I kind of learned the business from him and I hated every aspect of it. And the story was I was working at McDonald's as a teen, and how do we get through this quickly? And someone a religious guy took a shine to my long hair and my satanic Van Halen t-shirts because, everyone knows satanic. Van Halen's completely satanic, of course, of the devil. I should flash some devil horns here or something Dio would do. And so he took a shine to me and wanted me to get fired, and I outwitted him by doing what the girls do and got a hairnet. He wanted me to cut my hair. And about 2 weeks later or something like that, he caught me pulling my hair out of the hairnet and realized that I got him. He's a bully. So he fired me. And so I went home and told my dad, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was supposed to go to college, but my parents were poor. It was going to be a Pell Grant. So he goes, why don't you just go, the cement stuff's in the back. He moved on to some other businesses, but he goes, I got my account at the builders thing, you know what to do. Just go sell it and do it. I was like, okay. So I did it, and he was really respected in what he did. So I knew how to do it well, and I went out as this kid, and here I am, this green 18-year-old, I'm skinny as shit, dumb as shit, and I'm telling these guys I know how to do this, and I know how to do it really well. My dad ran a good business with it and taught me well, and so these these salty motherfucking construction guys would be like, you got to be kidding me. And I'd be like, no. And so I came up with this concept from sales. I said, I'll tell you what, give me a house. I'll go fucking do it. and if it's not done right, you don't have to pay me. And you tell construction guys that you don't have to pay them if it's not done right, they'll let you have the whole damn project, because they weren't going to pay you anyway. So I did that, and I scored a bunch of shit. And they're like, "Holy shit, this kid knows what he's fucking doing." And so that was my first. I didn't like. There was no sitting around going, "I'm going to be an entrepreneur." It was any of that bullshit that we think about nowadays. It was just like I just went. I didn't even think I was an entrepreneur. I'm just like, I don't know, I'm making $1 or $2. So there you go.
I love it. I started my first business in it as a teenager, so I love hearing other people's stories. Yeah,
yeah. I didn't even think about it. Nowadays, like all these kids are like, "Hey, it's gonna be," and back then you didn't do online stuff. So you guys mentioned something that was really a great paradigm shift that you talked about earlier, where and I'm trying to go back to it, but you talked about how. I think I've lost where it is, but I know there's something else that I have in there. You talk about how giving. I can't get it to flush back up. There was something you talked about though that was a great paradigm shift in leadership. Do you know what that was? Well,
there was a couple of things. One is when we give the focus back on the team, Chris. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a paradox, like we call it. If I give all the credit to the team. Mm-hmm. And I don't take any credit as a leader. Kyle did it. It was an amazing job. Chris Voss, his radio show and podcast is one of the best ever. He does the whole thing, and I go on and on and on. And they say, "Hey, Chris, good job." Nope, it wasn't me. It was the team. The paradox is I actually look good. When I give all the credit away, I actually look better. But what leaders tend to do is they want to say, "Thank you. I did do an amazing job. Thank you. It was amazing. Thank you. I did lead this team well." And so it sort of demoralizes the team because they don't feel appreciated. But the reality is you can accomplish both by giving it away. But too many leaders are so focused on themselves and their opportunities and their in many ways their arrogance and insecurities that they're afraid to do that because they don't want to get left behind, which leads to a loss of empowerment for your team. Empowerment's one of the key ways to create a self-led team, and so there's no trust. And it just kind of, sort of creates this spiral of frustrating. And then all of a sudden he doesn't like the team. And so he lets somebody go. And now you got to find someone else. And it's really just a matter of, stepping up and empowering and giving acknowledgement and, letting other people take the credit. And, as silly as that sounds as a leader, that is not what is happening across corporations, small businesses to big businesses across the United States of America today. We like to say it is. We like to dream up these boardrooms where we have this big leader who makes all the decisions and everybody loves. But that's just a Hollywood trope that doesn't exist survey after survey, no matter who does it or how many times we take it.
There you go. And so you guys talk about the humble leadership approach and six practices that distinguish remarkable leaders instead of the leaders that you've been talking about that are just kind of, it's all about me sort of thing. Do you want to tease out any of the 6 practices?
Oh, geez, this is a test. We'll grab
testing to see if you know what you wrote.
You want to throw them at us? And
inspire, empower, and elevate teams to new heights with humble leadership.
Yeah. The 6 practices were listen more and talk less. Show appreciation. Number 3 was step out of the spotlight. Number 4, admit when you've made a mistake.
Self-accountability?
And I talk about one of my mistakes in our book, one of my big mistakes that I made as a leader with the SEAL teams. And thank goodness it was in training, but it was still a mistake. And if I didn't own that mistake and bring it to light, all it would have done is, labeled me as a liar when the truth finally would have came to light. Number 5 was don't micromanage. And then lastly, the biggest one is welcome the criticism. One of my favorite things, and this one definitely came from the teams, one of my favorite things around welcoming the criticism is after every single mission, we'd come back to what I was saying earlier about, taking care of the gear, get all the gear done, put all your stuff away, everything's cleaned off. And then we all get back to the hooch. And if it's a training scenario, maybe we could crack a beer. If we're in the middle of Afghanistan, you get tea, but you crack a tea or a beer open and everyone sits down in a circle and we just literally go around the circle and we go, all right, Kyle, your turn. And I go, hey, on building B147, I went into the second room and I went left and I should have went right. I don't know what I was thinking. It caused Joe to come behind me and stack up the train behind me, the tactical element, and it just jacked a lot of things up. And I'm so sorry, guys. Like, that was my mistake. And everyone just removes their ego from that room, from that moment, ranks thrown out the door, and we just go to town. And in those moments, like, hey, the new guy that's been there for 2 weeks, all the way up to, the oldest guy in the room, is allowed to pick each other apart and just go, yeah, just write it down. Let's all be better. Let's all learn from, Kyle's mistakes. Let's all learn from Chris's mistakes. And it's a very a humbling exercise, but because it's part of the culture, it's just, an everyday affair.
I love that, though, because it's self-accountability. It also teaches that, the leader isn't infallible. And then, that's a life or death situation. If people aren't learning from mistakes in the U.S. Navy and SEALs, that's a life or death situation, because if you're just kind of continue to operate in your own blind spot, la land, somebody's going to get killed, or a platoon's going to get killed, or a squad, or whatever. Chris, and then go ahead.
I just want to insert there. Like, I feel like what you just said is really the problem with leadership culture. Is and there's nothing wrong with what you said. It proves that the leader is not infallible. They can make mistakes, right? But we've put the onus back on the leader. But the reality is, in that situation, what is happening, and what is the most powerful part of that, is that the team sees we all need to fess up to our mistakes as quickly as possible, so we can find solutions together as quickly as possible. And that's really the most powerful lesson there. Simply the leader owning up to being normal and doing that is important. But the real lesson here is the focus is on the team, because it teaches the team that they need to own up to their mistakes as fast, no matter their rank, so that we can quickly solve issues and move on and not hide from them, which is what a lot of leaders, typically do.
They definitely do. And then you just end up with piles of what I call scotomas. I think I got that from Tony Robbins, blind spots, where people are unaware of what's going on. As a leader, if you're not aware of things going on in your organization, or if people are just hiding stuff, one of the things I read years ago was, I forget where this is coming from, but it was a book about, I can't bring it forward, but it was about how to build a learning organization. I forget the guy who wrote it. He wrote 2 books on it, and it was about building an organization that learns, that commit mistakes and learn from them, as opposed to, like, oh shit, we shouldn't tell anybody, who broke the copier this week or something, there's a famous Tom Watson. I think it was Tom Watson of IBM. It's a famous story from IBM, where a vice president loses like $12 million on some, I don't know, whatever he approved. And he walks in the CEO's office and goes, hey, I'm probably here to tender my resignation. He's like, hell no, we're not firing you. We're not letting you quit. You just cost $12 million. We just educated you with $12 million. We're not losing you. You learned.
That was a costly lesson. We gotta get our money back.
We want our money back. And so it's interesting there. One question I had, this is what I finally came back to. That's what I was trying to remember. Very radical, because I'm not sure I would do the same. I would be like, I'd be standing by the tree shredder by the lake in Fargo going, I don't know about it. Let me think about it. So step into here. So one thing I wanted to ask you guys about, because you guys talk about building small teams, and it kind of hit me with the paradigm. One of the things that I believe in is the same thing you guys do, believing in a culture, setting an environment. And if you don't set that out front, that's what I love. That's what I was trying to get back to. You guys said, if you don't set a culture, if you don't set an environment, if you don't set a healthy,
you're going to have,
they're going to set it anyway. and it's probably going to be toxic and it's going to be ugly. And that's like, you guys should have a shirt for that. If you don't set a culture, one will set for you.
That's right.
But what do you guys think about this? When a leader can set a culture from a very high point, is there a way that culture can get misaligned, misinterpreted by having all these small teams? I guess that's a devil in the details question for you.
Mm.
If one leader in the small team decides that he's going to just create some other fucking culture.
I mean, yeah, the answer is yes and no, right? Yes, it can absolutely happen. That's such a great question. It absolutely can happen, but it goes back to what you were kind of getting to, just a minute before, was around, that radical, if you will, thinking. Mm-hmm. And then how is that radical thinking supported through rituals? Are the rituals reinforcing the culture? Right. And we talk about it. So, but what kind of rituals do the small teams have that then now reinforce the culture? Mm-hmm. And are you, allowing those rituals to improve? And they're not growing and dying on the vine, and they're not becoming archaic, or they're not becoming, stank, for lack of a better word. Are you literally allowing those team leaders and those teams to improve on the rituals, and then ensuring that, hey, this is translated throughout the other teams when it is a real big improvement that could actually reinforce, the culture, or the culture improvement, as I like to say. Does that make sense, Voss?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, I'll just throw in a little aside. I think that there's two sides of that. I think the question you're asking maybe is, hey, what happens is the cultures are misaligned in different parts. You've got that. And so how do you do that? And then the second part is, you generally have some core values that the whole company operates under, but I think it's okay for you and your department to have additional values that you operate. Hey, when it comes to my marketing division, here's how we operate. We don't just take orders to do things. We also think about how to push and promote things out, and we have fun. We take each other seriously. We use our strengths to lift each other's weaknesses versus complaining about each other's weaknesses. Kyle has this, Chris has that. Let's just tap into what we're good at and stop focusing on what we're not good at. And that's a core value that we have that maybe is different from what the whole company operates under for that. But as far as getting everybody on charge, I mean, Chris, you bring up a good point, and it's a mighty task. Because if you don't have the senior level leadership on board, you probably will end up with sections and pockets that don't fall in alignment, and it's frustrating. As we see, I mean, that's why the state of leadership in America is so broken. But the reality is, you have to focus on where you are. Whether you've just been hired out of college and you're an intern, you have influence over 2 or 3 people around you, how you do, how you act, what you do, and how you say it. And people will notice that. If you're a senior vice president, you have more influence. And so you have more responsibility to make sure all those around you are on the same page. But it's not, people will notice and say, hey, I want more of that. How do I get more of that? What are you doing that's different? Can you come over here? Can teach us how to do that. And I think you'd be surprised, and leaders would be surprised, that if you step in and start to do those little things, people notice, and they notice in a very, very positive way.
Yeah. I love the, and I'd like to go ahead. I'd like, one other thing too, that we kind of frame out is certain things don't necessarily matter. So it's finding that balance of, hey, what ritual can we reinforce and empower, as opposed to what specific ritual can you leave to the individual? A great example, I believe, is a ritual before a mission. Right? A Navy SEAL mission, right? Some guys will write a letter home to their wife. It won't get sent. It'll be just printed out and put in an envelope, right? Some guys will, recite some Bible verses or take a cross underneath their kit, or a flag in between their body armor and their chest. Wow. And my point of why I bring some of these are just some examples, right? You can obviously your mind can think of others, but my point is like, we don't have to state, hey, there's only one ritual allowed for this thing.
No.
Right? Like that doesn't need to be stated. What matters is, the very specific mission planning, for example, or back to what I was saying earlier, the after action review where we, criticize each other and humble each other in a good way. But I just wanted to add that in. What were you about to say, Chris Voss?
Oh, I was just going to have some fun with it. I was going to say,
please.
That's what I do. I round out everyone's ideas at the end.
I love it.
And then I put a bow on it, or I try to. I swing for the fences. Sometimes they miss. And sometimes I do too many segues. So I love the ritual thing, like you talked about, where you sit down post mission and you criticize each other in a constructive sort of way, and you push for self accountability. And I think I'm envisioning that in the business office where people sit around and go, hey, you didn't do your TPS reports this week, and Maggie says, yeah, I'm sorry for bringing fish into the microwave this week, and that sort of shit. Sounds like an episode of Office, really, when it comes down to it. But no, I love the whole rituals idea, and maybe that's what more CEOs and leaders need to do, is they need to say, we want to establish culture, but also what are our rituals?
Right. I think like a good example, right, is a lot of companies, public companies, will get ready for, quarter release, right? And then it's done, and then they just watch the market to see how the market reacts, as opposed to sitting down and doing their own internal AAR and saying, hey, what can we do? What could we have done better? How was our call? How was the CEO while he was on the phone? What could he have done in his vernacular and his presentation and his voice and his tempo? I mean, and on and on and on. I think, honestly, a little sidebar here, I think one thing that, going back a little bit, that Elon Musk actually did recently at, I think it was April or May, it was Q1 Investor Day. He got up, and it wasn't all about Elon. He had like 25 for Tesla, for Tesla. He had like 25 of his senior leaders on stage with him, and he wasn't even holding a mic. Like, they were holding the mics, right? And he was just there supporting them and championing them on. It was pretty interesting and pretty cool to watch. Yeah. And then it's funny, it's kind of sidebar. I'm going down rabbit holes, but it was kind of funny to watch how the analysts of Wall Street completely, they gave him a couple of them gave him good props for it, but not too many.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. We'll see how X works out. Those of you watching years from now, yesterday and today, he's changing it from Twitter to X, which is an interesting branding decision. So this is going to be a great book on leadership. And like I say, I love reading leadership books because there's always something that I'll end up reading, or some things that I'll end up reading that bring me a new paradigm. Or a lot of times too, it's the reminder. You're like, oh shit, I forgot about that. I forgot about that aspect. I got to go back and work on that. It was a problem I used to have where, it's, I think is it John Wooden, the basketball coach? And he used to always say to his players, hey, great layup and great slam dunk. Okay, buddy, but you can't shoot from the free throw, Mr. Shaq. So let's see you work the basics, get back to basics. And so being able to read about leadership and get back to the basics, see things from a different paradigm, makes all that thing. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Can I do a teaser?
Yeah, go ahead. Please do.
Okay, here's the first paragraph of our book. How did a group of 19th century explorers survive a deadly winter in Antarctica? Trapped in ice, no working instruments to guide them, and a sunless existence that turned men mad. It might have had something to do with penguins.
Penguins. Was Batman?
Read on. It's a good lesson. Hey, this has been great, Chris. You've asked some amazing questions. I think that, Kyle and I like to be challenged and our conversations that we do with the media, such as you. And we always, circle up afterwards. And I know that when I circled with Kyle, he's going to say, hey, Chris Voss, he asked a lot of good questions. I think so.
Are we going to have a circle meeting? We're all going to be self-accountable after this?
Yeah, we can do that. That'd be great.
There was that one moment that Chris Voss forgot the question that he was thinking of that for a while there and setting up. But we got back to it, so I was glad that we discovered it.
That's right.
Funny wrap-up. I'll just soapbox to the end here. Funny wrap-up. I went back to that manager who fired me 2 to 3 months later and said to him, I now make more than you did. Thank you for changing my life. Thank you for fucking firing me. And I shook his hand. I was honest about it. It wasn't a fuck you. It was like, thank you for changing my life. And I had no idea how much he really changed my life by making me self-entrepreneur because, once you get that drug, you're fucked for life. And I am. So
hey, I can't tell how many people I've let go that are like, thank you for letting me go. I think we think that people would feel awkward. And what you've done is you free them to go actually pursue what they were really meant to do. Yeah. But they hold on to you for so long that you're hurting them and they're hurting you. So
yeah, that's the favorite thing I'd say to all my ex-girlfriends. You need to go and you fly. Find what the fuck you want. I hope you find it.
I mean, I don't know if you can attach it to all your exes, Chris, but possibly.
I've got a lot of exes. And then they always say, you'll never find another woman like me. And I'm like, that's the point. Anyway, guys, give us your .com so people can find you guys in the interwebs.
Leadershipisoverrated.com.
I've been single for 35 years, Tom. I've never been married, wife and kids. I'm single, man. I've dated all my life, so I'm stuck with it. I've seen it all. And did we get everybody's .coms?
Yeah, we're the talent out there together.
There you go. Yeah. You guys are a pair. All right. Well,
check it out.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Order up the book wherever fine books are sold. Leadership is Overrated. How the Navy SEALs and successful businesses create self-leading teams that win. Comes out August 29th, 2023. Thanks for joining me on the show with my audience. We certainly appreciate it without you guys. Hey, go give us 5 stars over there on iTunes. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com. I already did YouTube. Anyway, you know where we're at. Fuck it. You've been here for 14 years. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.